Hey people, it's Kieran from the Run Testers, and today I've got a very special shoe for us to look at. This is the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro. It's not to be confused with the Adizero Pro, which is a totally different shoe altogether. Thanks very much for that, Adidas. And to be clear, this is the shoe that Adidas says is its fastest marathon shoe ever. They also say that it's aimed at a very specific group of runners, so elite half marathoners, sub-3 marathoners. So the faster group of people, they say, are going to enjoy this shoe most. Now I am really super excited about these shoes. I was excited to run in them. I've put in about 30 miles in them so far, and I'm even more excited to share my first impressions in this video of how this shoe is shaped up. So let's take a look. So first up, let's take a look at some of the details. Yes, it's got a super wedge of foam. Yes, it has some carbon in the midsole. Yes, it's got a mesh upper. And yes, it is designed for speed. It's also definitely going to draw comparisons with the Vaporfly and the AlphaFly and some of the other carbon shoes that are supposedly arriving on the shelves around about now, but I know some of you are having trouble getting hold of. So this comes in at 39.5mm stack height and a UK size 7. So that is just squeaking in under the 40mm limit that was set by the World Athletics in January. So what you're getting here is a 10mm drop. It's also 246 grams in a UK men's size 8.5. Now that is heavier than the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent and the Saucony Endorphin Pro, which both come in at around 230 grams in a UK men's size 9. So it's a heavier shoe overall. So when it comes to this midsole cushioning, you have got a new material. It's Light Strike Pro. This is the new midsole foam, and it comes in two sections, and that's different to the Light Strike that you'll find in the Adidas SL20s. And Light Strike Pro basically is what Adidas is saying it's its lightest and most responsive foam material to date. So when it comes to that carbon plate, Adidas has actually taken a different tack here. Instead of getting a foot-long carbon fibre plate like you'll get in some of these sort of super shoes, they've actually gone for what they're calling 5 energy rods, and they all sit under the metatarsals of the foot, so one for each, basically for each toe, and those are there to improve your running economy so that you can maintain your race pace for much longer and also recover quicker from hard, long runs. Also, additionally, in the heel, what you've got is a nylon and carbon fibre heel plate. That's on top of the midsole, and again, that's there to help with efficiency and actually to provide stability for the ankle joint. So these uppers are a Cellar mesh upper. That's Adidas's name for their mesh. It feels to me like a nylon mesh, and it's kind of on the inside, it's sort of coated with this sort of crisscross of kind of fabric, I think, to soften it on the inside and make it a little bit more comfortable. But it's sort of super pliable, super see-through, not very waterproof, but arguably very breathable. You don't get hot in these shoes. And the other thing to say is there's virtually no overlays on this shoe at all. There's one sort of here on the medial side, but it doesn't do very much, and there's a couple of, the 3 stripes are sort of slightly reinforced on the lateral side, but again, they don't really do much in terms of offering kind of support and structure to the shoe. It is just all about this mesh. So another interesting detail here is that you actually have what appears here to be extra lace holes. Again, I'm trying to confirm those details with Adidas to see if that's what they're for or they're just a design detail, but those are also carried through on the inside into the tongue. So that it looks like it's possible that you might be able to find different ways to lace this shoe down to find a more perfect fit for you. So on the outsole, there is a very kind of thin layer of rubber here, again strategically placed in the forefoot to add grip when you're sort of toeing off. Although these are very much a kind of straight line shoe, I would argue, they are not going to be very good kind of weaving and bobbing. They are marathon racing shoes where you're going to do very little turning. There's also a little bit of reinforcement, a little bit of rubber in a kind of key strategic place in the heel. That's something that we sort of see with the Vaporfly as well. And finally, the all-important price. These, if you can get your hands or your feet on them, are going to come in at £169.95 in the UK. That is cheaper than the Vaporfly, it's cheaper than the AlphaFly, it's cheaper than the On Cloud Boom, it's cheaper than the Saucony Endorphin Pro as well. So they are going to come in a little bit more wallet friendly than some of the other shoes that might fall into this bracket. So that is everything that Adidas has put into the Adizero Adios Pro. So now let's go and find out how they stack up when you actually take them out for a spin. So that is my first run done. I did 16 Ks, it's 10 miles. I wanted to go further and do a half, but I ran 44 earlier in the week testing another pair of shoes, and my legs weren't quite up to going that extra distance. But first impressions are really positive from this shoe. There's a lot of similarities, I think, here between these and the Vaporflies. They're very different from something like the On Cloud Boom or the Asics Meta Racer. That sort of full stack maximalist cushioning is very, very apparent. I think they're very forgiving when you get deeper into a run. They work best when you're clipping at your sort of fast marathon pace, top pace. But when in this run I got tired, I had to pull back. Actually, they have got enough cushioning to really sort of protect you when things start to go a little bit wrong, and that is really important. You don't get that from the On Cloud Boom, and you don't get that from, I think, the Asics Meta Racer as much. And actually, for a lot of people, that's going to be quite important. There's a lot of other things that are sort of slightly different. There are some strange feelings going on down there as well, but I will give you more detail about that back in the studio. But yeah, so 10 miles down, and I think these are a really interesting shoe. Let's find out more back in the studio. So now let's get into the details of how these bad boys feel. Well, let's start with fit. I wore a UK 8.5, and actually, and though they were a little bit of a struggle, there was a little bit of wriggling and a little bit tough to get on the foot. Once your foot was in, they actually were super comfortable, and I think came up true to size. There is a little bit of adjustment that needs to happen to get the top of your midfoot here into the shoe, and then get this tongue to sit nicely over the top of the shoe. And there was definitely, what we've got here, we've got some actually stitched in tongues down the side. And in order to get those sort of the gussets, if you want to call them that, to sit nicely on the outside of my foot, it took quite a little bit of fiddling and a bit of wriggling and weaving to make them sit nicely so that I could lace them down. That was one thing that was a little bit frustrating to put them on, but once they were on, actually these shoes were super comfortable. The uppers fit lovely, and actually I think these are one of my favourite ever Adidas shoes that I've put on. I love them straight out of the box. They hug enough and secure enough, but there's enough wiggle room in the toe box. It doesn't feel baggy in the toe box as well. That was something that I found with the Vaporfly Next Percent, is actually there's quite a lot, too much room, I think, potentially in that. And there's a little bit of that, the uppers on the Vaporfly feel a little bit baggy. None of that with this. There's just the right amount of that mesh there in the right kind of places. I also found there's plenty of room in the toe box, plenty of room to sort of wiggle those toes around for movement, to get your to feel contact and let your feet breathe and move as I think they need to do when you're pushing over a marathon distance. They also wrap the feet really well, and everything feels nicely secured. I didn't have any slippage when I was running. I haven't gone longer than sort of 10 miles in one sort of run, but I didn't have any slippage. I was held firmly in place. The heel collars, no problems there at all. They come up just high enough, no rubbing. There's enough padding in here to make it feel comfortable around the shoe without being over the top. There is a little bit more here than you'll get on something like the Vaporfly Next Percent. And I'm going to crack on about comparisons with the Vaporfly Next Percent a lot here. I haven't run in the AlphaFly, so I can't really compare those. But the side lacing on the Vaporfly, actually, I don't think is as good as this kind of almost sort of straight down the middle. It was really easy to get these to lace down nicely once your foot was in, and I think I preferred that for sure. Easier to get a secure fit. So let's talk about that run. Well, I have put 30 miles into these shoes so far. I've done a 10-mile run where I did some of those miles kind of at a nice sort of steady, easy-ish pace, and for me that is like around an 8.5 minute mile. And then I also put in some big chunks of kind of faster, sort of marathon pace, faster run miles, and that is around kind of 6.5 minute miles for me. I've also brought them to the track, and I've done some 400 meter repeats, and I've also done some other sort of steady 5-milers at a lower clip. Now, what I have found, and I'm going to go straight in with this, these are shoes that I have loved to run in from the get-go. So my other recent miles that I've been doing have been in the On Cloud Boom. And one thing, when I put this on, there was an instant difference. This is a shoe that feels like an absolute joy to run in. There's happiness here in this kind of midsole, albeit really sort of cushioned, springy, bouncy happiness that comes with something like this that has the carbon and that combination of carbon and sort of midsole super foams. The On Cloud Boom, I didn't find much joy in those. I found them too firm and I didn't really want to run in them. These are very, very different, and I felt like I wanted to put these on and go out and run in them again the minute I'd sort of stepped out of them. When you first put them on, as I said, there's something a bit sort of strange happens. You can feel there's a sort of instability, not unlike the Vaporfly Next Percent. And also, interestingly, I don't know if you can see here, but there's this kind of wedge cut out of the heel. And they almost sort of felt like they rock you back on the outsides of your heels when you're just standing in them. And then when you walk, you can sort of feel the inside bit sort of pushing you out. That's a really, really strange thing that sort of carries over onto the run. Having said that, they are definitely a firmer shoe than the Vaporfly Next Percent. I also did some testing where I put one Vaporfly on one foot and one of these Adizero Adios Pros on the other foot. And while there is a similar sensation in the run, I actually think that you get a little bit more punch in the Vaporfly Next Percent than you do in these. But I think there's actually some good benefits to that. You can see these, there's absolutely no give in these at all, particularly in that front section. Those energy rods in the front are stiff as you like, and that is going to really sort of propel you forwards. And you do feel that when you get up on your forefoot and run on your forefoot, that's when these shoes actually feel their most zippy, not unlike the Vaporfly Next Percent. But there's a crucial difference here. When you get tired on runs, tempo runs, faster runs, marathon pace runs, actually there's a little bit more here that makes them a little bit more forgiving if you do feel like you want to sort of slow down and rock back onto the heels a little bit more, or actually just go at a slower pace. I really didn't feel ever in the Vaporflies like I could run in those shoes at a slower pace. And that's really interesting for maybe taking these out on longer runs where you know you're not necessarily going to be going at full pelt for all of the run. That said, these are definitely a racing shoe. I'm not saying they're not, but I think that's actually something that's interesting. They are a little bit more forgiving if your legs do get a bit tired. And now, as I said, the furthest that I've run in these so far is 10 miles. I would actually be very happy to go further. I would have liked to have gone further. I just haven't had the time. I've only had them for about 4 or 5 days. I've put as many miles as I possibly could in them since then to get you this review out. But I definitely would like to go further in them. They feel like they've got a really, really strong mix of the right amount of that kind of cushioning, firmness, and spring and propulsion, and that kind of responsiveness that you come to expect out of these kind of super carbon plated shoes that we've all been kind of testing and sort of raving about. So the combination of those energy rods at the metatarsals and this Light Strike Pro midsole foam in 2 layers actually doesn't feel overbearing in the way that some shoes with these kind of setups can do. And I felt I could run very naturally in them. So I also just wanted to comment a little bit on the durability, and although I've only done 20 miles, so it's a bit early days to be talking about that and to do a real test. I'd like to see them after 100 miles, but they've kind of held up fairly well. There is a little bit of smoothing of this kind of outsole rubber here and on the heel there. You can see I've picked up a bit of the red of the track, and there's a little bit of wear on the outer edge of this kind of lateral heel side here. But overall, I thought I might be seeing a little bit more wear in them than that for this kind of type of shoe. And it does make me think, I wonder if these are going to last a little bit longer. I hope so. I mean, I think if Adidas could put a little bit more rubber on the outsole here, and I think actually people would be happy to run in these for longer. It would make them a far more useful training and racing shoe. So then let's wrap up with the first impressions of these, and I'm going to say it very quietly, but shh. But I actually think that Adidas has finally got his head back into the performance game and produced a shoe which might be out there for competition for some of the big shoes that we've seen of recent. I'm going to say it very quietly, I'm going to say it very gingerly, because I haven't really put in the miles that I would like to in these. I haven't put them through a marathon distance, and there's definitely more testing that we're going to do on the run testers here. I definitely want to give them to Nick so that he can test them out, because he's used all of the other carbon plated shoes so far, and he'll be a good man to get to compare these two. We're actually going to make a video on this channel soon, so you'll be able to find out how these stack up in the overall lineup. But I think Adi is back in the game, people. I think they've actually made a shoe that I really want to run in. Forget your nonsense kind of boost foams and fashion shoes that they've been making. They have made a performance shoe for marathon runners that actually here I think is genuinely really interesting. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I know that Adidas has kind of said that these shoes are really kind of for speedsters. They're for people who are looking for a sub-3 marathon, that kind of fast-paced runner. But I think with a slight difference here in the midsole foam and the way this shoe feels, I think they've actually produced a far more democratic shoe than they might realise. A far more democratic shoe actually than the Vaporfly Next Percent or the AlphaFly, not only in the terms of the way it runs and how forgiving it is if you're not running at your fastest, but also in terms of that price point. If they can get these shoes on the shelf so people can buy them, I do think they might actually have a hit on their hands here, because I think you can use this shoe potentially outside of race conditions. So yeah, just to round off my first impressions, super comfy uppers, a nice kind of lightweight shoe, firm but responsive, firm but cushioned, not overbearing in terms of the carbon effect in the plate and that kind of midsole combination, and genuinely just a really nice shoe to run in that I've enjoyed the miles I've done so far. I'm looking forward to do more. We will, as I said, be doing a video that goes more into detail of these shoes, a multi-tester review, and we'll be putting it up against all the other carbon plated shoes so you can work out whether or not these are the ones that you should buy. But so far, the first impressions of the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro are that I wish they had an easier name to say, but Adidas, I think you've made a fairly good shoe here. We will be back with a full review of these in due course. In the meantime, don't forget to like, comment, ask us questions you'd like us to answer when we do the full review. Hit subscribe so you make sure that you'll get that video when it pops. And also have a look around the channel because we've been busy reviewing all of the other carbon plated super shoes around here and some that aren't carbon plated as well. So check it out, and thanks for listening, people. We will see you again soon.